That fateful night, 30 years ago, when our community faced the most horrifying experience of their lives. That day, the cold night of January 19th, 1990, is etched in our hearts and minds forever. We will never forget that. It was a day when death danced the streets of Kashmir, when the facade of the secularism and the tolerance of our neighbors and our friends, the so-called friends, that was ripped off, and we saw the ugliness of jihad right in front of us. It was a day when frenzied mobs were pouring into the streets of our neighborhoods, when the mosques, they became the pulpits of broadcasting the hate speeches and the slogans. It was a day when the Kalashnikov-wielding terrorists marched freely in our land, and following them were thousands and thousands of locals. The war cries, the slogans, the shirks and the cries, they're still reverberating in our minds. Whoever has been through that night will never forget. It just creates that scene of terror. Even when it's been 30 years, when I think about that, I shake with fear. It was a day when 350,000 to 500,000 Kashmiri pandits had to take a decision about fleeing their homeland, a homeland which had been theirs for thousands of years, maybe more than 5,000 years. They had to take that decision because they wanted to save their honor and their lives, of course. It was a day when ethnic cleansing, which had already begun a few years before, but that culminated into basically a full-fledged force. The day of Macabre was so overpowering, the impending doom so forceful, that our senses were numb with fear. We were paralyzed in our homes. I remember huddling together with my family. None of us spoke a word. We were just silent. Every cry outside would throw us into a terror. And we didn't know when we were going to be the next victims. And many of us waited for that mob to just come in our homes and kill us, torture us, rape us, didn't know what. Today our lives bear no resemblance to that darkness, and we have moved on. But to find evidence of that night, you have to look deep into our hearts. And our hearts had buried that memory deep inside. We did not speak for 30 years. And today, when we talk about that, it just unleashes a torrent of bitterness in my heart and in the hearts of thousands of people. The pain that has been buried inside is very hard to release, and when we do release it, it is very agonizing. But forgetting will be treacherous. That is not an option for us. Our ancestors before us have gone through multiple exoduses. And each one of those exoduses has been more harsh and more painful because we have no recordings of it. Today we can talk about the deaths, the tortures, and we have numbers to prove that. But in those days, there was no recorded history. And the conditions were so terrible that I'm sure that their pain was much harsher than us. So we owe it to them to record these stories and our history. We also owe it to our children who have no idea who we are. what our history is, our history which is so magnificent, if not told, will be forgotten in our lifetime. We are almost at the brink of extinction. Our language is gone. Our culture is sporadically being, kind of revived. Our traditions are being lost. Besides the loss of life and property, we have lost so much more. We have lost our identity. We have lost our collective identity as a Kashmiri Pandit. The psychological trauma of that night and many nights before that and 30 years since has just devastated our community. The deaths that we talk about today are not only the deaths that happened during that period, but also the people who lived in those tents, those camps, died of heat strokes, died of snake bites, of scorpion bites, the people who died of heart attacks, of depression, and just heartbreak. Those people who just wanted to die in their own homes. The psychological trauma of that. The psychological trauma of not being heard. The government just denying you. Your friends not recognizing you. Those Kashmiri Muslim friends who we had grown up with. They denied our existence. And now when we talk about our ordeal, when people question and say, well, it didn't happen. You were cowards. We left because you couldn't fight. The trauma of all that, of denial, is all within ourselves. I don't know if any of the Kashmiri Pandits here and wherever in the world will ever forget that trauma in their lives. It has become a part of us. So today, we will hear many stories, many personal stories. And there are many more. There are hundreds and thousands of stories. I just want to thank all of you for coming here and listening to this. First, let us watch a video. Thank you so much.